Good evening, everyone, and happy Wednesday. So it's upload day, and I'm here for a really interesting storytime video about leaving my marriage and making hard decisions. This would be my last marriage that I'm talking about. I've been married 500 times, but this is my last marriage. My ex-husband and I met in the year, I believe it was 2014. And when I met him, he was actually taking care of his daughter. Like, he was a single dad. So I thought this was a situation that is like the ideal thing that happens, right? Single dad, taking care of his daughter, meets someone, gets married, you know, the stepmother kind of swoops in and saves the day because this, at the time, my stepdaughter, her mother was not involved. And so this was like a situation that I felt like I could handle, though I didn't have any kids of my own at this time. I met him and I kind of almost fell in love with his daughter in the way that I fell in love with taking care of her and being there for her before I fell for her dad, if that makes sense. So it's been a while since it all began. I remember initially when I met him, I knew subconsciously, I think I covered this in another video as well, I knew that I wanted to be with a man that wasn't afraid of responsibilities, wasn't afraid of having children. That was my number one, like, red flag. If having kids scares you, if you know, commitment scares you, I'm not entertaining it. And that has always been my rule, only because I grew up watching a lot of that go on in my own household. So I always, whenever I met someone, I kind of put them through little tests, you know, hard conversations, just to make sure that I kind of could sense where their mind was at, if they were just telling me what I wanted to hear, or if they were being honest and sincere. And in this situation, my ex-husband was taking care of his daughter at the time. You know, she had her own little room set up for her, and it was the girliest little setup ever. And so I thought, you know, this is going to be a good situation for me. This man seems like a loving guy, and he loves his daughter, and there's really nothing more important than seeing how a man is with his children. If a man doesn't have a good relationship with his children, that tells you all you need to know before even getting serious, to be honest with you. And we continue this relationship. I meet his mother, which actually was a very scary thing for me, because I was just so intimidated. His mother is a very opinionated person, but a wonderful person. I'm just gonna put a disclaimer here. I still talk with my ex-husband's mom, and I'm still very close with her and his sister and his family. So they're all just wonderful people, and they've been so supportive throughout the entire endeavor that has been the marriage, the separation, the divorce. They have been like a second family to me, like a family to me throughout the whole time. So they're really good people. I moved in, and at this time, my ex-husband liked to drink a lot. And I am sure that most of you know like where this is going. It's never a good move to be in a situation with somebody that is drinking like compulsively. It has to be, you know, every so often. It has to be the specific day, and then it turns into it has to be. I'll give you an example. So when I met my ex-husband, he was in the Marines, and we all know Marines really like to kind of stick together. They like to drink together. They like to hang out together, kind of live the bachelor life if they're not married. Well, one time in particular, I had been with him for about a year, and my cousin came over to visit me, and of course, he was drinking and his daughter was asleep, so I'm just kind of making sure that the house is mellow enough that nothing's gonna wake her up. And after a little bit, I noticed that my cousin was spending a lot of time outside. My ex-husband used to drink and smoke, so he used to spend a lot of time on the balcony. They were out there for like a good chunk of time. I'm like, you know, what's going on? Like, what's so important that I can't be a part of this conversation? This is the first instance that was a red flag, and I'm gonna warn all the women out there, like, red flags do present themselves, and when they do, believe them the first time, because I didn't, and that's why I bring to you this story time today. So, also disclaimer, this was almost 10 years ago now. My ex-husband and I, we do have one daughter shared together, and though we're not married anymore, we have a very copacetic relationship. We get along just fine, and we actually live very close to one another at this point in life. So that's where I am right now. So I have no grievances with my ex-husband, but this is for the purpose of me sharing a chapter in my life that was very difficult, and then maybe saving somebody from going through the same difficult journey that is very avoidable. So my ex-husband and my cousin are out there on the balcony for quite some time, and I'm kind of inside wondering, like, what's going on here? I know he's drinking, so he's not in his right mind. If I'm gonna be honest with you, I knew that. And you know, after a couple hours, my cousin comes inside, she kind of chats with me a little bit, and then she just leaves abruptly. At that time, I was like, what in the world is going on? I thought, you know, you came here to chat with me. Like, is that not the case? Like, that's weird. So she gets to her car, and she actually called me from the car, and she told me he was hitting on me, and I didn't feel comfortable staying at your place. So immediately my stomach kind of drops to the floor, and I'm like, oh, okay. Now, women's initial reaction is always to blame the other women. And I think that this is the part where people go left when they should go right. In instances like this, I was angry at my cousin. I felt like she had betrayed me because she was entertaining it. For whatever reason, she was entertaining it. She allowed it to happen, is what I was feeling inside. In all reality, she didn't owe me any loyalty in a relationship kind of sense. She was my cousin. She owed me like family loyalty, but she didn't owe me relationship loyalty. This wasn't my boyfriend or, you know, whatever. This is a family member. So it almost kind of made it sting worse. I didn't know what to think of it, so immediately I went to him and I said, hey, is this true? And he says no. And of course, he's pretty drunk at this moment, so I know that something is up, because nobody just says that and then gets so uncomfortable that they leave. So she actually texted me basically what he had told her. And I went to him, I confronted him about it, and I said, is this true? And I showed him the telephone. And he said, well, yeah, you know, I said something like, etc., etc., etc. And at that moment, I was really ready to leave and go home, because I felt like I wasn't being respected anymore. Like, if you could do this while I'm in the same home as you with my family, there's no respect going on. There's obviously no love happening here. There's no, like, any kind of respect. I'm respecting you, but you're not treating me with the same. The next day comes, and this is a weekend, so this is a Friday, and this kind of starts a whole feud where I don't talk to my cousin for years. I still haven't talked to her after this, and this was 10 years ago. Only because I felt like after that situation, I really was wondering, who can I trust? And I didn't feel like I could trust her anymore. I didn't feel like Though it wasn't completely her, I didn't feel like she was somebody that I could put my trust in to have around. And that's a very dangerous place to live. When you feel like you have to babysit someone in a relationship, that's not a relationship that you want to be in. Because you cannot babysit someone 24/7, 365 days a year. If somebody wants to cheat, they will find a way, whether you're babysitting them or not. The minute they get a free second, they're going to do what they want. And that's just the ugly truth about it. At this point in time, I wasn't aware of all that. I wasn't thinking about any of that. I was just thinking, how do I save this family unit? Because this is what I knew. You know, this was what I wanted. I wanted to be a mother to his daughter. I wanted to be a good wife. I wanted to keep this family unit together. And what I was told my entire life was that women go through these things. It's just kind of like the journey of a woman. You know, you just go through it. It's something that Hispanic culture teaches, but it's a very toxic thing. You shouldn't ever allow people to take advantage of you, to, you know, cheat on you, and then just kind of turn the other cheek and say, well, it's my husband and he comes home every day, so it's fine. No. I learned the hard way that that's a very just gross way of thinking about things, and it's not fine. And settling for mediocre is not okay. Being okay with he comes home to me, so he must love me is not okay, because that's not how love works. People will show you who they are, and you need to believe them the first time. So as I continue with my cautionary tale, just always keep that in mind. There was a party at a apartment across the way from us, like the neighboring balcony. They were having a big party, and the weekends was the time that my ex-husband liked to drink. So he would go Friday, Saturday, and then not drink during the work week because he had a strict regimen. So he would really like kind of binge drink almost, I would say. I would describe it as binge drinking. Just way too much, way too fast. Everything was too much all at once. He went to this party across the way, and I'm at home with his daughter, and she's sleeping, and I'm just watching TV. And as time kind of goes on, where I'm by myself for so long, I'm kind of starting to get like this feeling like something's going on. So I text him. I'm like, hey, are you coming home? It's getting late. And he came home, I think within the hour, because it's about 1 a.m. at that time. And I am guilty of waiting for him to go to sleep, and then I went through his phone. And I found on his phone that there was a telephone number from another woman where he was saying that she was beautiful and he wanted to meet up with her, and etc., etc. Knowing that he was drinking, I tried to talk myself down from having just going through my anger completely. I saw these messages, and you know, anyone that knows that when they've been cheated on and you see the proof, it's no longer a suspicion, but you see the proof in front of your face, your stomach just drops and you're like, now what? At that point, I was like, this is the second time this has happened to me, and what do I do? But of course, right afterwards, he would apologize and say that it would never happen again, until it happened again. So these two instances happened. He was pretty good for, I want to say, a couple months. And then about a year and a half into the relationship, I found myself having a baby. And though that was such a joyous time for me, my pregnancy was very difficult in the way that I had nonstop panic attacks, in the way that I just couldn't function. I had too much anxiety. I was in the hospital every other week getting IV fluids because I was sick out of my mind. I didn't know that morning sickness could get so bad, but it was so bad. December came around and I always spend Christmas with my family. And I was newly pregnant, so I was very sick this Christmas. The night before, however, I actually went through his phone again for some reason. Something was telling me to look in the phone. And I found out that he had been very active on a dating website. And it hit me very differently now that I was having a baby. Because now it wasn't like I could just walk out and leave. Now I'm here, I'm having a baby. You know, this should be a time where I'm being supported left and right, and especially by the person I'm having a child with. Instead, I found out that he was on a dating website the night before we went to spend Christmas with my family. And at that time, when I saw that he was active on that app and that the messages were like from hours before I'd opened it, at that moment I knew this was not going to work out. I knew that this relationship was kind of just convenient, and I knew that, you know, he was going to be a good dad to my daughter, but just probably not a good partner to me. And that's okay, because that happens more and more today than ever before. People, wrong person, right time, or right time, wrong person kind of ordeal. As the months went on, you know, I stopped looking at the phone because I stopped wanting to see my reality. I stopped wanting to find out what was going on. Against my better judgment, we got married when my daughter was, I think, 1 or 2. And in that moment, I remember when I was getting my hair retouched upstairs, and just right before I walked down the aisle, I was thinking to myself, you know, I hope that this is the thing that changes him. I hope that this is the marriage that changes the way that he looks at relationships and doesn't look at them like they're disposable, like people are disposable, because now there's a child involved, there's 2 kids involved, and now he's not going to be just my boyfriend, but he would be my husband after this. So I will never forget walking down the aisle and just seeing him, seeing the groomsmen, bridesmaids, and then as I'm standing there and looking at him, and the woman is kind of preaching to everybody, I'm smelling alcohol in his breath. I'm like, oh no, not on my wedding. My wedding was chaos in the best way possible. And I'm just gonna be honest with you. My wedding happened at my grandma's house, and my grandma, geez, she deserves a whole series of her own. She's a character, but the best person that I know. My grandma is everything and then some. If I could describe her in like one term, everything and then some. She's the strongest woman I know. Ew, I'm getting choked up just talking about her. She's been through more than any human being should have to go through in this lifetime. She is the absolute, like, rock of my life. And she always has been since the moment I met her. My grandma was absolutely hammered at my wedding. I'm just gonna put that out there. She was hammered, she was gone. By the time I arrived to get into my wedding dress and everything, my grandma was, you know what, to the wind, gone. She told me, I started drinking at 7 o'clock this morning out of my nerves. So she had had a bit to drink, and she told me very nicely that the next morning she woke up with the bartender and the DJ. They had passed out on her floor, and she had passed out on her couch. So if that tells you guys anything about my grandma, she is a character, but she's the most loving character of all time. My grandma is like the Lucille Ball of this generation. She's hilarious. You can't take her anywhere. She's gonna cause a scene whether you like it or not. You can't be introverted around her. She will make sure that everybody knows where you are and what you're doing. And when I was little, it was quite the change from the very quiet introverted life that I lived at home to now being so extroverted and out there and doing all these fun things with my grandma. I have so much to be thankful for when it comes to her. She has been probably one of the biggest blessings to me. After the marriage, we go home, we start to live a typical life, or so it seems. And I was a stay-at-home mom at this time, staying home with my stepdaughter and my daughter, the two girls. And the two girls are going to, karate, and they're involved in different things. And my ex-husband would leave for work for months at a time. That's just what his job entailed. He'd have to be gone for a good chunk of the year. And, after doing that for so long, you really do get used to it. It stops being like, oh my gosh, I'm so sad that you're not here. It just becomes a way of life, really. I became very used to it. The girls became very used to it. And they would always kind of anticipate when Dad would be home. They would be really excited to see him all the time. And one specific time, he came home, and I went back to old habits, and I looked through his phone, and I saw a message that said something to the effect of, "How are your wife and kids?" Immediately I lost it. I said, you're not even trying to hide it anymore. You're telling people you've got a wife and kids. What are you doing? What are you doing? Everything is being destroyed right now. What are you doing? And he really rarely had any answers for me as to why he would do these things to purposely almost destroy the family that I worked so hard to keep together. This was a hard time for me because my self-esteem was so bad. I was so tired of carrying myself in a relationship where it was really just me, myself, and I in a marriage, and then taking care of two girls on top of it. I forgot in the midst of everything who I was, what I stood for. I forgot everything about the person that I am. I forgot everything about what makes me who I am. And that's not a doormat. I'm not someone that can be easily manipulated. I'm not someone who can be walked all over. But in that time in my life, I felt like I was being walked on over and over, but I was allowing it. And that was the worst part. I was allowing this to happen. And I got to a point where I was like, you know what? I can't even complain anymore because I'm allowing this to happen to me. So him and I had a conversation where I told him that I was done. I'd be leaving with my daughter, and we were going to be separating and eventually divorcing because I just couldn't handle it anymore. That was kind of the end of an era for me. It was a really hard decision to leave because I was faced with the usual. I don't want my daughter to be without her dad, and I don't want to make my stepdaughter feel like I'm abandoning her. And there's so many things going on in my mind at the time. These were the hard decisions that I had to really think about. I know I'm not the only one out there. There's a lot of people in that same situation. So it's just so much harder when there's kids involved. But I knew for my own sanity and my own mental health that I had to get out. I had to be the example for my daughter about how you handle things. I didn't want my daughter to grow up watching her mom be somebody's doormat, watching her mom get, cheated on and start arguments because I'm going through that with her dad. I didn't want my daughter to grow up and see that. So what stood out to me was that I needed to lead by example. I need to show her what to do rather than tell her what to do. Because if I stay in this cycle of just silliness, she's gonna grow up thinking that this is okay and this is love because this is how my parents were. And I didn't want that for her. I wanted her to be in an environment where she knew that both of her parents loved her, still love her, but there's boundaries there. Now, like I said, I did not want to separate the family, but there came a point where I had to, and I felt like I had no other choice but to separate and leave. The world works in such mysterious ways. It seems like when I left, things started to shift. I couldn't sit around wondering what he was doing. I couldn't call him and be on the phone all night to make sure that he wasn't doing anything he was supposed to. I couldn't babysit this man anymore. And once I realized that, I was at peace with leaving. I was at peace with doing the right thing by my daughter. I was at peace with the fact that I made the right decision so I could show her how you handle hard decisions in life. This was among one of the hardest things that I had gone through. And to this day, I have the life experience now to know that that was the right thing to do. At the time, it felt like I didn't know if it was the right thing to do. I felt like, maybe I'll leave and then he'll learn and then we'll come back together and the family will continue. You don't really know what's in store because I'm sure that happens for some people, but for me, I really had to put my foot down because so many years of just finding out about affair after affair after affair was just not fair. It was not fair to anybody. As time went on, I really became, it almost was like I was more and more at peace with every day that came and went. And I wish that for everyone that's living in a chaotic marriage or household. It felt like being a single mom without being a single mom, like married single mom type situation. And the best advice that I can give through this whole ordeal that I've been through is listen to your gut and believe people when they show you who they are. Because people will show you who they are, but you have to believe them. You cannot invent scenarios or invent what you wish people were. They will show you. And that continues to be true to this day. I remember how heartbreaking it was to leave in my car with everything packed, with my daughter in the back seat, thinking that she wasn't going to have a family anymore. And I was going to be raising her, just me, myself, and I. Today, that's not the case because I'm remarried. My life is very much the opposite of what it was many years ago today. My husband is very attentive. I don't have to check his phone, which is kind of the biggest blessing, I feel. With everything that I went through in that marriage, I learned so much about my strengths, because not everybody can go through that for so many years. The hardships, I mean, when things were tough, they were really tough. Not everybody's built for that. Looking back on that time in my life, I can tell you that I learned so much about the person that I am, the mother that I am, the survivor that I am as well. And it's another kind of thing where I wouldn't go back and change it, because it taught me a lot about me and what I'm willing to put up with and what is a deal breaker. And I feel like every woman at some point has to go through that hard transition of, this is what I'm willing to put up with and this is what I'm not willing to put up with. And let's see how it works out. You cannot make somebody be the person that you want them to be. They have to be who they're going to be on their own. And for a lot of years, I thought that I could change somebody. But I was sorely mistaken, because nobody can change anyone in this world. People are going to be true to who they are. People will always do what they want to do at the end of the day. The saying goes, people don't change for a reason. It's because they don't. I'll never forget walking down that staircase with my bag and my belly in hand, getting in the car and driving a whole hour with full contractions to the hospital. An hour with full-on contractions to the hospital seemed and felt like a lifetime. And I was alone doing so. When I got there, the nurses asked me where my husband was. And I said, he's at home asleep. And I'll never forget the look that a nurse gave me. She said, you could have gone into labor today. You could have had that baby in the car on the way here. To drive here in the middle of contractions by yourself was extremely dangerous. And I remember looking at her and I said, I had no choice. I either drove here or I was going to have to deal with it on my own at home. Because I was told not to call an ambulance because it costed too much. And she just looked at me like, oh my gosh. Wow. That specific nurse came in and she said, you know what? After they realized that I was having contractions, she said, I'm so sorry for whatever you're going through at home. I'm so sorry. And that was one of the pivotal moments for me, that somebody really looked me in my face and said, wow, what you're going through is not normal. Her birth was really a turning point for me, I feel. It turned me from someone very naive to becoming a mother the minute that I saw her face, to becoming a protector. And it's like in that second that she was born, all of my silly materialistic worries were not real anymore. All of a sudden, all my focus was on this little person and how I could keep this little person safe and be the best example for her. When it comes to making these hard decisions, you really have to weigh the options that are available to you. You know, is this, if I stay, is this going to work in 5 years from now? If you don't think so, then it's probably not a good idea to stay. If I leave, is that going to be more damage than staying? If you're in a cycle where you're consistently fighting and you're not getting along with your spouse and they're consistently doing something that is making you not trust them, then staying really isn't a valid option. It would be convenient, but it's not valid. And convenience is really what was killing me. It was convenient to just sit there and stay there in silence. It was convenient for me to just keep everything I was going through to myself and not tell anyone that I was really struggling. Some people will come across very similar situations where things are convenient, but it can only last for so long. You can only put up a facade for so long until you reach that point to where you have to be true to who you are. And in order to be the best parent you can be, sometimes you have to make that really hard choice to leave. And there's no way around it. There's no, like, let's take a break for a couple of months and then I'll come back. You have to just make a choice. Are you going to stay in a hard situation where you know that you're not happy? Or are you going to take an uncomfortable leap into something that might be so beautiful someday? And that's what I did. And today, I can tell you, things are exactly that. So beautiful, so opposite to what I had been through. I didn't know that it was possible that a man could care for me the way that my husband does. I didn't know that it was possible. Like, I was in a relationship with myself for so many years, honestly, that when I met my husband and he was so attentive and he was just a very different man, and he had, you know, a couple more kids. He had 4 kids when I met him, and we have a son together. So we're like the Brady Bunch now. But the dynamic in the home is a very loving dynamic. This home is full, but it's full of love for everybody. My daughter is very loved in this home. And I had to make that difficult decision, leap into the unknown for a chance to be here. And if I had to do it again, I would do it again. I didn't know that a man would care enough to go to each and every one of my OB appointments. I always went to every OB appointment with my daughter during that pregnancy. I went by myself each and every single time. I was accompanied once. And when I was pregnant with my son, with my current husband, he went to every single appointment. Every blood draw, every single appointment. And sometimes my husband, current husband, works down the street from the hospital that I delivered my son at. Sometimes he would get to my appointments before I would. He was there with all the questions. He was just very supportive. The polar opposite of what I was used to. And I kind of sat there in awe of how different things were. How much I was missing out on, and seeing what it's like to be actually loved by somebody. What it feels like to wake up to somebody making me coffee every morning. That wasn't a thing. I was experiencing all these things for the very first time. Somebody to just call me for no reason to say, I love you. Hey, I'm on my lunch. I love you and I miss you. I'm like, what? You know, experiencing all this for the first time. And I always think about it. Had I not taken that leap, that scary leap into the unknown, I would not know what it is to be actually loved by somebody and cherished by somebody. And that's all that I really wish for everyone, all my subscribers, all the people watching that have not subscribed. If you're watching and you haven't subscribed, do me a favor and subscribe because I've got lots of ideas, lots of life lessons to teach, and I'm just getting started here. Thank you for joining me on this Wednesday night for this late night story time. I appreciate every single one of you. Again, if you're not subscribed, please subscribe to the channel and join me for new upload Wednesdays. Even if it's a Wednesday night, I'm still going to deliver. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you again on Wednesday.